because the recent conversations have been really positive and a great exchange. But what about the top two things? Where does one start at? Especially for the longest, they did not see that there was an issue, or what's around them every day mirrors their style. So how does one start to look at things or begin to talk differently when they're communicating? I'm all ears.
No, I got you. Good question. So one of the first things I would say is be open to seeing yourself differently as a communicator. Be open to leaning into more tools from a personal development level. So when there are resources, when there are tools, when there are workbooks, when there are all kinds of books and things available to you, I would say find that particular best fit for you. Find that particular publication, find that particular workshop, course, resource that will help you approach the conversation different. Because when you're, as you said, Shatiera, when you're used to communicating a certain way, when you're used to leading and initiating conversation a certain way, when you're used to it kind of going in this same kind of cycle, it's harder to imagine sometimes that it can be different. It's harder to negotiate a different approach because maybe you guys have been doing that for so long, you find yourself kind of falling into the same pattern. So being open to initiating something in a new way, approaching something in a new way, gaining resources to help you really level up as a communicator. That's again why I created so many different resources to make available to others, because I decided, outside of just the clinical side of speech, there are real life relationships happening. And one of the ways that I approach my clients is not just strategy, and we're done. Let's think out strategy, but let's think out application. How can this be applied to your day-to-day life? If I do nothing for you, I want to make sure that the things we do in the clinical space carry over into your day-to-day life. So I speak very often about making sure that I really consider the culture of my clients, consider their lived experiences, consider what they encounter on a day-to-day basis, consider what dynamics have contributed to how they arrived at this place and arrived at my office. So that's one thing to consider, grabbing a hold of resources, tools, courses, workbooks, all those kind of things. And then ask questions. I am like a questioner from the beginning. My mom still tells me all these different things when I was younger. And she's like, you always ask these really deep questions, but I was always this very curious person. I wanted to understand why. I wanted to understand, like, why does it have to be that way? Or what reason did they do that? I study people because I'm interested in people and why they do what they do, why they say what they say. So asking questions for the sake of understanding, not trying to catch someone in something, not trying to catch someone off guard, not trying to prove your point, but really making sure that you ask questions for understanding. So again, this is what I heard you say. This is my understanding of what you said. Does that make sense for what you're trying to have me hear? Or I'm hearing this. I don't quite understand why you have chosen to do that in the way that you did. Help me understand a little better, what your method is, or what your reason for that is, or what's your plan for that. I even asked, we haven't talked about the kids yet, but I asked my own children who are early elementary age, so tell me about your thoughts on that. Tell me what your reasons are when it comes to that. Tell me what your plan is for that. What are your ideas on that? How would you better approach that? What can I do better as a parent to better support you? So all of these things, I'm questioning things. So I'm not assuming. I'm asking questions for understanding. I want to know more so that I can approach the situations differently and I can meet you in a different way.
Dominique, what if you have someone that you're trying to do that and they're not giving you anything? They just blank, quiet. They don't have anything to say. I don't have nothing to say. It's pulling. I know I just was on another meeting and it's pulling to get a response because either they don't know what to say, they don't like confrontation, they're the best effective communicator. How in that space, because you want to have a great exchange, you're trying to encourage them to be able to communicate a little better, but it's really, do you walk away? Do you say, okay? Do you try back? What would you, encourage in all of those dynamics?
Good question, Shatiera. So one of the things I talk about is pacing and creating a safe space. So when I think about myself as a communicator, I can only be responsible for what I say. I can only be responsible for how I receive information. I can only be responsible for the way in which I process that information. I share, and then I keep the door open for what may come of that experience. So when I'm thinking about someone who may have a difficult time responding, when I'm thinking about someone who I feel I've kind of hit a wall with, I try to pace out how we approach the conversation. So the first thing I do before that, I create this safe space. I think about how can we facilitate this conversation better. For each person, it may be different. There's some standard things. Maybe a coffee shop works better. Maybe, going into their space versus them feeling like they have to come into your space because that's safe for them. Kind of figuring out how to set the atmosphere in such a way that you both feel that you're ready for the conversation, open to the conversation, able to approach it. And then also thinking deeply about, I'm still thinking about the safe space part. I'm thinking about how you can create an atmosphere that they feel open to sharing, open to be transparent, able to be vulnerable with you. Because we think about these previous experiences, and sometimes they help to inform how we show up into that next situation. But allowing that person to know that while maybe this has happened, that has happened, I'm really open to a different way. I'm really open to approaching this differently. I'm really wanting us to have this conversation so that we can be able to meet one another in a different space, in a different place. So really setting the stage for that is so important, and finding a way in which you guys can both be able to feel comfortable to do so. So that may be a different setting. That may be, having a nice meal. Meals always bring about conversation. So it may be that. So just kind of thinking deeply about how that can be. And sometimes it's you initiating it and then allowing them to take the time to really process that this is what we're doing and this is how I need to, be able to be open to it. So that's one thing, that safe space. And then pacing is so important. I talk a lot about pacing because how we pace a situation, how we pace a conversation is so important. We can easily get pulled into different distractions. We can easily be checking our phone 1,500 times, checking the time. Maybe you thought, okay, we can just have this conversation now because I'm ready to do it and we just need to have this happen. Well, maybe that person has not fully processed everything in a way that they feel ready and comfortable to share, So thinking about the timing of things is so important. Pacing out how frequently you may have to have that certain conversation. So you may come to the table and you decide, okay, this is what we're deciding to do. This is the conversation we need to have. We both came knowing that, but how ready you are as an individual is very different than maybe how ready that other person is. So being able to pace yourselves in such a way where you're open to the fact that we may get to a particular part of the conversation, but we may have to table it and then come back to it. Or making sure that you set the time aside. Don't set it before a meeting. Don't set it before, unless you just know I only want this amount of time with this person. And, this is all I'm giving them because of whatever reasons you decide to do that. But if you're really trying to unpack different things, really trying to approach things in a different way, I would definitely consider the timing, definitely consider making sure you're free of distractions, making sure that you guys have created a safe space so that you have that open dialogue is available. And then be open to the fact that you may have all your strong points that you're ready to share. They may need to just take on what you have shared, process that, and come back having been able to really think out what you share and then share back with you. So definitely show up with some strong points. I talk about intentions a lot. Being able to help that person understand, why are we here? What do we intend to walk away with? Are we just going to say the same things over and over? Are we going to rehash all the previous experiences, all the issues that we have? Or are we going to come to the table with some clear intention set? You have your strong points. I have my strong points. I'm here to actively listen to you. You're here to actively listen to me. We've set aside the time appropriately. We're pacing ourselves out. We're not rushing through the conversation. You're willing to listen. I'm willing to listen. and just thinking deeply about how that can be approached in that way. That tends to have a different outcome than maybe times where you just were like, I'm just going to say what I need to say and take it or leave it, or whether you like it or not, at least I said my piece, you know.
Thank you.